Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Dedicated Dropouts, a show where we learn from the experiences of college dropouts and what they're doing to find success. I want to welcome Alex Daniels to the show. He's gone from being a college dropout to a CTO. But Alex, why don't you tell us in your own words who you are and just a few bullet points if you don't mind.
Sure. So in just the bullets, the way I would describe my life, who I am, would be first, follower of Christ; second, husband; third, father; fourth, athlete; and then fifth, more for fun, but definitely a passion of mine, would be musician. And in that order as well.
So appreciate you outlining that in a very simple way, right? We're going to dig in more to the person of
Yeah,
Alex
I'm sure those are a
Daniels.
lot of people's answers.
Right, right, they are. And it is interesting, though, to hear the order, right? Like the fact that you put it in that order. One of the reasons I asked the question is just to understand better who I'm talking to and how people prioritize, how they identify is a very interesting thing, in my opinion. A lot of people will put their profession very first, right? They might have family and kids.
I didn't even, I guess I could have put that on the list.
And so I will add CTO. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about your CTO position, what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded a medical technology company. We do AI automated medical record retrieval and analysis about 3 years ago, and jumped on full time in January. And that's what I do in my day job. Also on about, I guess, 4 advisory boards now. And yeah, I mean, I love tech. I love founding companies, and it's fun, but it's definitely not. It definitely doesn't fit into those top 5, I guess.
That's great. Well, and that's what's interesting about you to me, Alex, is, and what's impressed me in our relationship is that you are these things first, right? Even in our conversations when you were my mentor at Bears Dev, I could tell that these things, these aspects of who you were more important than the job. But because they were more important than the job, they very much influenced the way that you did the job and the way that you interact with people. And it was, those interactions were just an outcropping and a demonstration of these 5 aspects of who you are. So
thank you, Nate.
Yeah, totally fine that you forgot that you were a CTO for a second in my book. Do you mind just telling us about, I know it's not one of the questions I asked you to prepare, but do you mind telling us a little bit what you do day to day as a CTO and maybe as an advisor to some of these other companies? Those are pretty unique positions. I think a lot of people would love to be in. So what does that realistically look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. And I'll split it out into one other, right? Because I mean, a lot of people can be a CTO. I believe that they have the skills to be a personal leader, as well as a technical leader, a personnel leader, as well as a technical leader. But also being an entrepreneur is really what fuels the advisory side, because you have to be able to make decisions for the business using engineering as the tool, instead of make decisions for engineering based on business objectives, right? And so that's a little bit of the split between the 2 roles, is the switching costs between both a business owner as well as the tech guy. As a CTO, my day-to-day, it's pretty straightforward. It's vendor negotiations, code reviews, architecting some of the concepts, epics, features that we're fleshing out within our organization. It's one-on-ones with engineers. It's hands on the code often as well, still, especially at a small stage startup. It's stand-ups every morning and executive leadership team meetings every afternoon. Kind of your 2 bookend 5 to 10 minute stand-ups. But yeah, that's what the day-to-day looks like as a CTO. As far as an advisor, to answer the second part of your question, it's typically lunch meetings or a quick 30-minute after work meeting at 5 or 5:30 or so. Oftentimes one-on-one or an on-site quarterly or once a year, anywhere in that range, to actually meet with the rest of the advisory board as well as the CEO and go over plans for the next year and influence the outcome by just bringing your expertise to the table.
So now the big question is, how do you go from being a college dropout to a CTO and advisor, right? So let's start there.
Overnight success.
Yeah,
One day.
overnight. Yeah. When and why did you drop out? Walk us through what you were thinking and what was going on in your life at that time.
Yeah. So when I started college, I had already lived out on my own for a little bit, and because of some of my upbringing and childhood, I just lived a lot more life in a lot of different parts of the world than I think most. And so when I came back to the US in high school, the kids were unrecognizable, in my opinion, from their personalities, their level of maturity, and what I wanted to do. And so I started doing my own thing in high school and had a small exit there. And then from there, I wanted to play soccer. That's all I want to do my entire life. That's still what I want to do, but I blew out my knee. So I think that's
Alex,
where it stopped.
I didn't realize that you had a small exit in high school. What was that? I'm just curious.
So it was a notification platform, and I went to go for my first sales meeting, and the company that I was meeting with said, "Have you sold it to anyone else?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Can we just buy the project?" And it was 3 months worth of work, 5 digits size check. And I was happy. I was happy with it. And said, as a 17-year-old, I was like, okay, sounds good. And I realize now that I got ripped off, but it was, it was a learning lesson, and it was a fantastic experience. And as far as learning code and doing something new and innovative and yeah, it was definitely a stepping stone. We'll get to those later in this conversation, I'm sure, on making good decisions early in my life.
Right. So it sounds like one of the good decisions that you were making was, I'm going to learn how to code. And
I'm going to teach myself something.
Yeah.
That was it. I'm going to teach myself something, and then I'm going to do something with what I've taught. In the same way that my younger sister, I taught her how to play piano when she was really young. And then I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this skill? And then she started doing choir, and then she sang at the Vatican when she was 15. And she developed that skill. And then now she's going to school for music, and it's because she realized she was passionate about it. But, maybe we rolled the dice and we got lucky, both of us, because we found our passions quickly, but we did something, right? We didn't just learn a skill and then leave it. We tried it out. We did something with it in the real world and applied it. So.
And was the impetus to learn that skill, was it a specific problem you were trying to solve, or just pure curiosity?
It was pure curiosity. It was, that's Nate, that's kind of everything. I can't consume enough information to satisfy, what I want to do, to the point where my wife asks me to, pause a lot of times in the evenings, like just to stop talking about things that she could not even begin to care about.
You're like Neo in the Matrix,
No, it's that I know so little, and there's so much information out there, and so much of it interests me, and that's it. That's it. So I'm just constantly consuming, and don't get me wrong, discarding what isn't relevant or what isn't. Sometimes,
Yeah, figuring out what's actually going to be useful information. But a lot of times you have to do some wading, right? You have to wade through a lot of junk.
Like right now, I'm super interested in, quails. So it's like this thing.
Quails, like the bird?
I'm just trying to see, like maybe as a family, we'll start raising quails. Who knows? And it's been something I've been doing research in for the last month and a half or so. And maybe it might not be a thing, but there are good signals right now that it could be.
You're exploring it.
Just learning. Yep.
So sorry, I cut you off though. So you had this early exit. You came back from living abroad and realized, holy cow, I don't really fit in with these peers because of the maturity, and you were very driven, wanted to learn. You start college at some point.
So I moved to Ireland after that to play a little ball overseas, and then I blew my knee out, came back, and kicked off college right away because I was like, I think that is the correct answer. Like, doesn't really matter how much money I made. it wasn't enough to retire on forever. So I was like, I got to learn an appropriate skill. I also know I can sell decently, so I'll also get an internship at the same time. So I got an internship at a marketing firm where I was selling marketing products and following around the senior sales guy and learning about branding and traditional marketing before digital was huge, and also starting to learn about inbound and digital at the time as well. This was 15 years ago almost. And then at the same time, starting my first semester at UNCC. I was bored out of my mind at school. And it could be that, you know, I haven't gone to enough college to know, I guess, but it could be that those early stage classes are very entry level. And most of the kids I was going to school with were wanting to party and throw down. And I really didn't care about that stuff. I really, really didn't care. And so instead of that, I just kept honing skills around sales, marketing. Still, you know, I'd stepped away from coding a bit, but it was still a big interest for me. And I started moving to design, and design brought me full circle back to coding. And so I dropped out after my first semester, didn't even take all of my exams. I was like, I'm not even going to waste my time. I took 2 and I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm not giving back. So, so I took off, and that was it. That was the decision that I just needed to take a path that moved me quicker than college. And so the good decision in my mind at the time was I can teach myself these things in a more efficient way than college could. And it turned out to be right. It's not for everybody, I guess, but it turned out to be true.
Yeah. One thing I think that you really had going for you was that really insatiable hunger for learning.
Yes.
Right. Because the benefit of college, the benefit of a structure like that is the responsibility, both financially. It's like you're paying to be there. You have expectations from professors, which I think is beneficial for a lot of people, because otherwise they're not going to learn. They are going, I mean, people go to college and they party anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know, at least there's somebody or something holding them accountable. I think most people need some level of accountability to push themselves to grow and to learn. But it sounds like you just had this desire to do so by yourself, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. So and it still persists.
Yes, I can attest to that. So what are a few things that you did? So you drop out, you're like, okay, I'm not going to finish these assessments. I'm not going to go back to college. I'm going to start teaching myself. Was that what you said to yourself, or I'm going to start teaching myself, or was it just I'm going to go do something else?
Well, I had made a couple sales on my own, still functioning as an intern at this marketing company. I was like, you know what? I'm learning so much, not just as a salesperson, but also as a marketer, as a designer, as somebody who works with the branding specialists within an organization. I'm just going to consume as much information, spend time after work with people, pay people for their time to try to just extract as much as I can out of their brains, and learn. And so from there, that's what I did. It was just every single path, open the door, not necessarily walk through it, but open the door, look around, establish a decent understanding of what I'm looking at, and then choose to walk through it or not. And so, for example, marketing, that's a door that I actually ended up walking through. I didn't walk through branding. I got a good look at it, and I realized, you know, I can still design a logo if I need to, but man, it is not my main skill. I looked through the marketing door and said, hey, this might be something I'm interested in. I started out as an inbound marketer. I got promoted to a campaign manager. And then 6 months later, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the slowest game of dice that I've ever played. I don't want to do it anymore. So I started teaching myself more about design, because I was really intrigued about design in general, not branding, but more on the UI UX research and design. And so I started going down that path, and that's a door that I dove into and that I still do today. And it led me right up to the door of real engineering, right? Not just connecting to APIs and spitting a product out in 2 to 3 months, but building a full scale enterprise level application. And And I started working on websites, working at an agency, moving down the career pipeline. But everywhere I went, I had at least 3 to 5 of my own projects going on the side. None of them are working. All of them are failing because they're just projects. They're just projects for me to gain more skill, work with more technologies, and all of a sudden my language stack goes from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 different languages that I've worked with, to infrastructure, to API, to presentation layer, to backend services, microservice architecture, and expanding as I'm just better understanding these concepts, pulling from articles, pulling from people who have done it better than me, not specific books and media, but just gathering as much information as I can and synthesizing down to what makes sense and what the best way is to do something. And that's how I got there. That's the path that I took into engineering.
So going back a little bit, something you said, you would come to a door and look in, right? You didn't necessarily go through the door, but you would come, open the door. How would you go about doing that? It sounds like you valued mentorship. You said that you'd pay for people's time, but how might you recommend to somebody that doesn't know exactly what they want to do? How would you recommend them to get a look in the door? Because that can be a hard thing, right? I remember people asking me in high school, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I haven't." And looking back, using the same analogy, I hadn't looked through enough doors. I hadn't peered in. I ended up doing an internship at the local hospital my senior year, and that door, I closed it quickly. I realized very quickly I do not want to do this, which can be just as valuable a lot of times in your career as finding something that you love. Knowing what you don't want to do helps you figure out what you do want to do. So what's maybe some advice you give somebody that's looking to figure that out, looking to look through those doors? How did you go about doing that?
Great question. When you see the doors and you see the words like marketing, engineering, and you're looking at all the doors, right? The first thing you want to do is find somebody who actually knows where the starting point is, has the key to open it, to start laying some foundational items out there. So while I was working my day job, I was learning about the foundations from these people and buying people's time. Sometimes it's just a cup of coffee. I would meet with a close colleague of mine at the time. His name was Tom Murray. He's the ex-CEO of Hilton International. And he retired here in Charlotte to work for the CRVA in retirement as the CEO, the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority. And wow, what a wealth of knowledge. Oh my gosh. And so I could buy him a coffee, and he'd want to meet with me because he wanted to mentor young minds. That was it. And he's coming from 40 years working in massive organizations, in the last 15, 20 years working as an executive in Hilton International. That's incredible experience that you can garner as a business manager, as an enterprise executive. And I learned a lot from him within the leadership and, if you will, career path movement. Manoj Govindan early in my career as well. He's a big economics investor, VC type personality here in Charlotte that a lot of people know. And he invested a few lunches that I bought him, just so that he could break down to me, business and early career path, and understanding what it looks like to move up the ladder, not necessarily with the flow of the river, but on your own in a different way, because he had to do that himself. And so he wasn't swimming with the trout. He was jumping rocks and moving ways other people weren't, and had tons of experience to give to me to do the same thing. And so looking through the door can be a couple different ways. But then on top of that, when you're standing at the door yourself and somebody's not talking to you about it and you have to keep moving, I'm still doing my career, developing my marketing skills, being a campaign manager day to day. And then at night, I was grinding. I was giving it my all in engineering. I mean, there was times where I would go 8-hour workday and then 8 hours, right after that, right into coding, and just felt like I was forgetting English. I was learning code so quickly. And then to be able to retain it, you had to practice it, right? And so everything I would learn, I would practice, learn, and practice, and iterate. And that was me developing those skills. And there's a lot of things that I've done where I develop skills that I don't need, or develop accumulated knowledge that I don't need, but I had to understand the foundations to understand the path that it could take me on. And there's no way I could have understood the final outcome without building up a little bit of knowledge around the starting point and the basics of it. Marketing was that way. UI UX design, branding was that way. I can talk about branding all day, and I can, we can have a good conversation about what it looks like to be a brand manager or a brand specialist or work in design under branding. But I realized that's not the career path that I wanted to go down from all the skills that I learned from that career. So buying people's time, yes, I've actually paid mentors as well to work with me, but it doesn't have to be like that. Plus, with YouTube nowadays, my gosh, the problem is synthesizing the bad information, right, from the good information. And that's where a lot of morals, values, and ethics come into play to be able to understand good and bad, zeros and ones.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point, because how you interpret the information that comes at you is going to be very much based on who you are, right? This, and that's a very personal thing. But what I hear you saying really is you got to look in those doors, one, just by asking, right? Taking people out, saying, hey, can we get a coffee? I'm interested. So again, stemming from your curiosity, stemming from that, I want to learn. Maybe I will never use this skill, or maybe I will never use this lesson, but at least I'll learn about it enough to make a more educated decision.
And honestly, most of the lessons that I learned were what not to do. From people they're like, man, I made this mistake. I did X, Y, or Z. I dropped this database before deploying to production by accident. Like, oh boy, well, how did you do that? And okay, I won't do those things.
So anything else before we move on to the next topic? We've talked around a little bit what you were doing that put you on the road to success after dropping out. Is there anything else that you want to call out specifically that, you're looking back at Alex Daniels, just dropped out, and you're saying, hey, if there's a few things you can do, Alex, this is what I'd recommend?
And that's, there's 4 things that I thought about before the call to answer that exact question. Would be an insatiable hunger for learning, alignment through propinquity, propinquity is just a fancy word for being near people. So alignment on goals, alignment on understanding, alignment on success, alignment on what to do through just being around those types of people that can give you those answers. Fail often, fail fast, and then just let it go. My wife's exact words to me all the time is what makes you different than others is you don't fail the way others fail. It's almost like I've never seen you fail, yet I can count how many times you failed. And the reason is just because for me, I like the word failure has a bad connotation. Like what it should equate to is learning opportunity. And there's no falling down with failure. Barely a scratch on the knee. And even the big failure, which I've had some big failures as well. You just keep going. You just keep walking. You keep running. Whatever the pace is that you're comfortable at, you just keep moving. So that's the fail often, fail fast, and let it go. And then the last thing, final one, is good choice privilege. And this definitely leans into my personality a bit, but the way I describe good choice privilege to everybody is the ability to discern, judge, persist and pivot, and forget. And discern is the ability to discern what the options are and even bring in other people to help find more options if you're not the person to bring all the answers to the table. Judge what the right option is, and then persist through the decision you've made, or pivot from the decision you've made quickly and forget about it and then start it over. It's just a cycle. And that enables, if you do that well, you're existing within this compounding formula of good decision privilege.
That's interesting. It's I have a thought on that, but I want to go back to your fail often, fail fast, let it go. Could you give us an example of a failure that you could recognize? Maybe a lot of people would think this is a failure, but you use that to build a success, or you look at it as a failure potentially, but it wasn't really. Can you give us an example of how you reacted to that? Like what it was and how you reacted?
Yeah. So I started a company called Join Progress, and I invested probably about $75,000 over into it within like the course of 2 years, and then tons of beyond that, my own time, my own blood, sweat, and tears, coding it, building it, and I ended up selling it for $1 just to get it off my plate. And I think most people would call, yeah, $1. Just take it, get rid of it. And they were like, well, we have to have some type of transaction. I was like, Venmo me $1. I don't care. Like, get it out of here. And what's funny is they're turning into something, but it was dead weight on my plate for the priorities that I had. And sometimes even if something can be successful, you have to prioritize what else you have on your plate.
Sure.
And so for something that could have been successful to somebody else, it was dragging me away from the things that would have made me even more successful. And so I had to cut the line completely right in the moment. And so I think, especially at the time, I mean, I was not doing quite as well financially as I am today. And so it was a bigger hit in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But more frankly, my wife had a worse reaction than I did to it. I said, great, it's off my plate. Now I can focus on what really matters. And so many people would sit there and look at the $75,000 that they lost. And I went, look at this time. Look at the $75,000 plus worth of time that I get back every day, you know? So that was, to answer the first part of your question, that's what it was. But where it led to and the outcome of it was me being able to multiply the efforts on the valuable items and assets that I had on my plate. And that has returned, let's see, 8-fold since that loss. And so in a way, me making that cut was part of the investment.
Yeah, that is a great mentality to have. I think people will say, oh, well, you're just calling it an investment to call it an investment. But let's look at college versus that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might go 70
from that.
Yeah, somebody might go $75,000 in debt. That's pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
And they might spend 4 years getting a degree that they're never going to use. Or you could spend $75,000 of your own money trying to build something, learning all of the lessons that you did. It's interesting though, if you look at it as purely a $75,000 to $1 failure. If you look at it as, wow, I just spent $75,000 on my education, success, right? And
absolutely.
so
I mean, and you think about it like this, the only person I had to pay back was myself.
Right.
Too. So,
right.
I mean, there's
no interest.
Yeah. I mean, well, we paid it back in interest, right? But I mean, I think the biggest thing that I learned from it, the biggest value was what I learned from it, right? And not in the traditional education of coding, because at this point I was an active developer in my engineering career, but really about the leadership, running a company, what it takes to get a tech startup off the ground, which is different than some of the other companies that I've been in, where maybe I worked for a tech company as part of the founding engineering team or early stage in management, or had my own bootstrap small company, but nothing to where I had to figure out how to scale something that was supposed to serve thousands of people, that was, completely SaaS, that, people want to look at hundreds of $1 million on valuations and things like that. And that's what we were trying to do. And it was a total failure in the traditional sense, but in the non-traditional sense, which is kind of the realm where I exist, I feel like it was huge success for how those skills that I could take to my next engagement, my next company, my next, relationship, my next, and when I say relationship, I mean relationship with a company, advisorship more, all of it, it also taught me how to better manage my time, for my family, like in a startup. Like it's so much that I learned from it.
Yeah.
How to better spend the money that we had in a startup. I mean, oh my gosh, so many skills.
Invaluable. So since dropping out, what's been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome? That was more of the how you see what others might see as a complete
Right.
failure as more of a success, as a stepping stone. But what's been the largest challenge you've had to overcome since dropping out, and how have you overcome that?
Yeah. This does tie back a little bit into like what is a failure, right? The only failure I truly feel like I ever had was getting injured playing soccer. You know, poor decisions compound into poor outcomes. Good decisions compound into good outcomes. So playing soccer, I was blowing a lot of money, partying, staying up late, not taking care of my body, not eating as well as I should have, not training as well as I should have outside of training with the team. And it's just poor outcome. But as far as the challenge, since I dropped out specifically, and I mean, I think challenge is the right word because it's hard to see things negatively for me, is that no degree rejection. I remember I was moving to a new company, and in the transition, I had 2 job offers, and I had 1 job offer from Lowe's, and I had 1 job offer from this Google Ventures company, and it was paying. They were both paying about the same, both kind of architect or senior management type role, senior manager type role. And Lowe's rejected me, but Google Ventures didn't. And I remember sitting on the phone with Lowe's, and they were like, "I'm sorry, like we have to rescind the offer." And I was like, "Why?" You know, it's fine. I wasn't going to take it anyways, but why? And they're like, "You don't have a degree. And it's company policy that you have a degree." And I was like, that's the kind of stuff that I think came close to hitting me in the heart a little bit, because it's like, you made bad decisions, you know? And I'm like, and then I have to refactor my outlook in that moment and be like, hold on, no, I made this decision for a reason. I did the analysis. I synthesized the data. I made the decision based off of data of who I am, not just population data. And I moved forward. I made the right decision. Not everyone's going to agree with that decision. Let's keep moving forward. So that overcoming people's opinions by not caring much about people's opinions, essentially how I overcome it. And I know it's a lot easier said than done for most, but fortunately, again, this does naturally lean into my personality. I place my focus in absolute truth, hard facts, data, you know, when trying to make a decision. And so it hit hard, but I was able to deduce that consistent success came from objective sound judgment, right? And it goes back to that good choice privilege mentality. And I realized in that moment that this is just something that's going to happen, and that it just really doesn't matter. It just really didn't matter. I just didn't care much about people's opinions, but I did care to hear them, because that helped me synthesize data.
So what would you say to somebody, they just got rejected from a job offer because they don't have a degree? They're fully qualified in every other way, similar to you. They don't have a degree, so they don't get the job.
Yep.
What's your advice to them?
I don't have enough information. Is this their only job that they applied to?
Only job that they applied to.
The answer then. Go talk to more people. Go talk to more people. Go find people who think like you. Go fill your calendar with meetings with people who might be able to put you in the right path, send you to the right people to talk to. I mean, if you have a job that you get rejected to, or 2 or 3 interviews that you got rejected because you didn't have a degree, You're just not talking to the right people. And frankly, I mean, whenever those types of things happen, it was always an opportunity for me to possibly pivot as well to maybe a slightly different industry or things like that. So when I came out of when I started at Map Anything, which got acquired by Salesforce, I came out of an agency, like building websites. PHP, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, basic stuff. And I was like, man, I really want to get into application development. And that's some of the stuff that I did earlier in my career. That's some of my side projects. I think I've got the chops at this point. I want to be a product engineer. And that's what I really got into. So it was a chance for me to pivot, right? In Map Anything, I mean, they didn't think twice about hiring me. Lowe's thought twice because I didn't have the pedigree, even though the skills were there, right? And that's okay. That's okay. It's just I was talking to more than one person, and that's really it. Just align yourself with the people that are going to think like you and operate on the same mentality, same value, same level of ethics.
Yeah, one of my potential visions for this podcast. It's a pretty free flowing idea at this point. It's fun for me. But one of the ideas is kind of a dedicated dropouts network, right? You're talking about finding people that are like-minded in the sense that, hey, I don't care where you went to school. Can you do it? Which is a much more common thought process in the tech industry as well. Going back to your experience, Google Ventures versus Lowe's, right? But finding a network of people, finding others that respect you and value you and what you can do over the letters after your name, where you went to school. And I will say there can be some intangibles from going to school. Like I was talking with your former coworker, my coworker, Christian, yesterday, and it's amazing the network that he created while at college. Right.
And I would say if you choose to not go to school, that's what you should be doing in those early years, are skills and network.
And that's what the vision that I have for this dedicated dropouts network could be, right? How do we connect people that maybe didn't get to go to college, whether that was for financial reasons or just the timing was wrong, they had to drop out, or they chose not to go. How do we create this network of opportunities within like-minded people? So that's it's cool. Interesting that you bring that up because it's a thought I've had specifically with this podcast.
And I think to build a network, I mean, the values have to be there, right?
Right.
And so what attracted people to accepting meetings with me was the genuine desire to want to learn, and then the genuine effort to learn, and then the genuine effort to apply that learning.
Right.
And I think if you are a dropout and you're looking to do something, but you don't have ambition or drive, you might need to find what your passion is.
Right. And that's why I specifically named this podcast Dedicated Dropouts, because there is a difference between being a dropout and I think what people traditionally think. Like when I told my mom that I was quitting college, that was a hard conversation.
In tears, I'm sure.
But she's seen the dedication over the last several years, and now she realizes, oh, there are other ways to learn. This is the 21st century. I mean, YouTube alone, right? But you've got Udemy, you've got Coursera, edX. You can take
none of those things were around when I dropped out,
which amazes me, right? And I was talking. One of the first interviews I had on this podcast was with another CTO, Jesse Empey. He works with my dad quite a bit, and he was talking about how he literally read a textbook to teach himself how to do mobile development.
That's right? Exactly how I learned about microservices architecture, was reading the book.
And so so as much as the 21st century enables us to learn maybe more quickly or have more at our disposal, the tools have been there, right? Yeah. The tools have been there, and they just continue. Yeah, you have to have the motivation, you have to have the discipline, but they just continue to become more and more accessible, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like if you wanted it the whole time, you could have done it. And I could set the laptop in front of you open the course for you and tell you the answers over your shoulder, you know, and you still might just not care.
Right.
You've got to be motivated to want to learn and want to learn about enough stuff to figure out what you want to do. And engineering is just one of many things. I mean, I love music. I love athletics. I love working out. I love, you know, animals, like this quail stuff I was telling you about. It's just the sheer pleasure of just learning, consuming information.
It's one of my struggles in life is that there's so many things that are interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the values at the point of the career that I'm at and having a day job is it focuses my attention into one area. And even the job that I have is, I mean, you know, it covers so many different technologies.
It's a good opportunity to learn.
It's a great opportunity to learn, but it focuses my attention in on, okay, these are the tasks that you have to learn about, and you have to learn about these technologies to be viable, right? So moving on with the question, the next question I have is around what's influenced you, specifically media, right? It could be a book, could be a podcast. Heck, it could be something like a Slack message that I sent you when you were working with us. I'm kidding.
That's actually what did it for me. That's all of my success. This one Slack message that Nate sent me.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. We won't reveal that. It's going to be at the very end of a book that I write someday.
Yeah, join the dedicated Dropouts network to.
That's shameless plug. Secret. Shameless plug. No, but for you, what has been that most impactful media in your life?
I mean, it's an easy answer. And at first I wasn't sure, to be honest, about how relevant was this podcast. But I mean, like you and I had talked about before, it is. I mean, it's the Bible for me. It's what defines my values, my morals, my character, on and off the field. And what I mean by that is, you know, in the job and outside of the job, you know, and how I am outside the job just influences eventually how I am within the job. And in very, very layman's terms, through the sanctification process, I become more like Christ. That's the goal. More Christ-like, always failing, because we're not perfect, but that just, my goal is that shows up in every part of my life. Right. But the Bible's clear about decision-making. The Bible's clear about integrity. The Bible's clear about work ethic in employees and employers. The Bible's clear about hierarchy and organization. The Bible's clear about a lot of different parts of it. And you know, when you're studying theology and apologetics, that also forces you to have a deeper understanding of those things and how to apply those in your life. And so, long story short, that is the biggest influence for me every single day, as well as hopefully a growing influence in my life every day.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because like I said to you, this podcast is about understanding the people and their journeys. And what I appreciate about this is so often I think people separate the personal and the professional. Oh, this is what I do for my job, but I'm somebody else at home. What I like about what you're saying, though, is any habit, anything that you consume, whether it's media, whether it's food, that you bring that to your profession, right? That you are who you are, and that comes into work. And whether that's running your own company or whether that's being an employee, that directly influences how you're going to respond.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you started out after your college dropout experience. Has the Bible been part of that all along the way? Was that a daily meditation with the Bible that's been influential, that habit, or are specific parts of the Bible that you say, okay, I can really apply this to my professional life? Maybe a big decision that you had to make professionally, the Bible helped you make that decision. Can you speak to that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's like 4 questions in there, so let me back up just a
Pick
second.
your favorite. Pick your favorite and run with it.
Okay. So yeah, the Bible's been an influence since the beginning of my career, since before my career. It was not the focus at the beginning of my career. It's something that I partook in instead of incorporating God's word and the relationship I have with God into everyday life. About 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, wow. About 5 years ago, I started really diving deep, studying at a new level, thinking about how much time I spend learning all of these different interests that I have. And that if I just spend a fraction of that in the word, how much I'd be able to learn and consume. And then eventually that turned into, diving deep into systematic theology, and then diving deeper into foundational apologetics, and then teaching courses on basic theology and teaching courses on basic apologetics, to then teaching actual courses and on theology and apologetics. And the stronger I've become as a teacher, the more I've been able to learn. Because when you teach something, you learn it, right? You have to learn it at a different level to be able to teach it. And honestly, it's just opened my eyes to how applicable God's word is to every part of our lives, and that it's not, God's word in my personal life and then my job. It's God's word, the foundation of everything. And that's perspective came into play about 5 years ago. Right before I had my first son. I'll tell you what, having your wife get pregnant puts a fire under your butt in a lot of ways, both in your career and in your personal life and your home life, and your, whether you have pets or not, whether, how much money you're spending on groceries each week, whatever it is. And in this case also, diving deeper into the word and recognizing what the priority should be as a follower of Christ. So I think that was answer to one of the questions.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And listening to what you're saying, I was listening to another podcast about product, and this product leader was talking about, before you have any sort of organizational process, the people that you're working with and you individually need to have what she called a personal operating system. And to me, what your experience with the Bible does, and just religion in general, it helps you have that strong personal operating system, right? You mentioned integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, I think something that's really interesting, especially as an entrepreneur, is the idea of faith, right? This idea that you have this vision, you believe that something is going to happen, but then you also have to show your faith in your actions, right? You have to manifest what you believe will happen in what you choose to do each day. And so there's a lot of overlap, even in some of those basic Judeo-Christian values, but whether that's Buddhism or other religions throughout the world, I think it's a great tool professionally, and one that I hope people don't segment too much, right? It's like, bring your religious beliefs into what you're doing, because they're very valuable.
No, you can't have at-home values than at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And if as a Christian I go, God, I'm going to do it your way because you are the way, the truth, and the life. I can't choose when I get to do it this way.
Right.
So it's totally part of work.
So speaking of reading, I see one of the answers to this question, but a tool that you've used, I'm just going to say it's speed reading. Is that, I imagine you don't necessarily, maybe you do speed read the Bible, but how did you
Much harder.
How did you learn to speed read? That's my question.
So actually, I took a course. Awesome. I took a course when I was 19. Changed my life. Honestly, man. It was through ExecuRead. Bruce Stewart is the owner operator, and he actually taught SEAL Team 6 how to speed read back in the day. And he reads at 10,000 words a minute. I mean, I couldn't even pretend to try to obtain that at this stage in my life, just because it's all you got to do for a bit. to be able to get that fast. And if you keep practicing, you do get faster, but I mean, it would take an insane amount of time. But when I left that class, I was doing about 2,700, 3,000 words a minute, something like that. And I mean, the only thing slowing you down past like 5,000 words a minute is just how fast you can turn the pages. And so it's been a tool that's allowed me to just consume with comprehension mass amounts of information in a very short period of time. And that's the key, is that you can get really good at speed reading, regurgitate, but not be able to comprehend for long periods of time because you consumed it so quickly. But when you learn speed reading correctly, 75% comprehension is or higher is considered real comprehension. If you can comprehend what you read at 75% or higher, that's a comprehensible reading speed. And so today I'm probably sitting closer to like 2,000 to 2,300 words a minute. It's not a skill that I practice. It is a skill that I use daily, but I'm not sitting there in the book doing the training, which is interesting because it's actual training. I remember the first day of the course, like my eyes were sore. Like it's bizarre. It's bizarre. I tell people this, and luckily I'm giving Bruce third-party validation, because when I hear Bruce talk about it, people roll their eyes all the time. And then I'm like, no, guys, like, you don't realize, like, this is a real thing, and it has a real impact in what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, send me a link to that book. That sounds amazing.
Oh, it's not a book. It's like a course. I sat in a room with this guy for like 24 hours over the course of like 2 days. And then another weekend with 24 hours, and then another weekend, 24 hours.
Does he only do in person then? Or is there some sort of online training that does?
This is a long time ago at this point. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I can always make the intro, but he's, at the time it was in person.
Gotcha.
Where I sat at this big granite concrete table with a book in front of me and felt like I wasn't reading anything for like the first 2 days, but my migraine was setting in and my eyes were sore. It's crazy. Wow. You're essentially stretching your field of vision without moving your eye away from the center of the page. And you're just consuming information like almost like a screen reader.
As opposed to the traditional word by word,
letter by letter by letter. I was then consuming sentence or line, then sentence, then paragraph, then page at a time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I would be very interested to learn more about that, because I currently feel that a lot of the learning I'd like to do is restricted by time. That's the great enemy, and competing priorities. And so,
yeah, imagine how fast, if you could make decisions on what you want to do, if you want to learn about something, if you could consume it quickly.
Right.
It's like a superpower. It is. And that's exactly what it is. It does slow down a lot on refracted light. Reflected light is much easier on your eyes, like looking at a book. But looking at a digital screen, I think it probably drops to like 900 or 1,200 words a minute, which is still fast. The average reader does like 250 words a minute.
I was going to say, I'm sure 900 to 1,200 words a minute is faster than what I'm currently reading at. So
it probably is, but it's but I mean, reading on a Kindle or something like that isn't as easy as reading on a paper book.
Interesting. Well, Alex, I know we're coming up here on the top of our hour together, but I really appreciate the conversation so far. Before you leave and have a great rest of your Friday, if you want to just drop a mic on us in one sentence, what's the most important lesson you've learned from dropping out, and why?
Yeah. Good decision privilege is a compounding formula.
Here to enlighten us what that means?
You said one sentence. Yeah, I mean, this is a lesson learned over the years since dropping out, but it's the most valuable lesson I've learned. The world views anyone who wavers from what the system deems as the norm as a failure. But I mean, that's just not the reality. Just people as individuals aren't population statistics, right? And so you have to be able to figure out based on who you are, what you're good at, what your skills are naturally, not just, I'm good at marketing, but like I'm good at analyzing situations. I'm a creative minded person. I'm a problem solver. I'm, engineering minded. I'm a, mathematician. I'm a science geek, or I love biology. Like figuring out, what it is that you're good at. I know I basically only listed like STEM because that's where my skills lie. I'm not a great writer. I write like I'm writing technical documentation. Like it's terrible. But you figure out what it is, and then you apply those skills of who you are naturally into what you want to do. And then you got to make the best decision and look at the options in front of you and be able to analyze again, discern, judge, persist, forget, discern the options, judge what the best option is, either persist through that option, even if it's hard, if it was the right decision, or pivot, and then forget about it and loop again, because you'll have other things that hit your plate to make, to discern what the options are and make a judgment call on what the best one is. And that is a compounding effort. The more you do it, the larger the value gets of the reward next to the output. So yeah, good decision privilege is a compounding formula.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that wisdom with us, and appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, hope it was valuable for somebody. I really enjoyed being here, Nate. It's always good talking to you.
Well, that's it for this episode of Dedicated Dropouts. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more insights in the future. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, stay dedicated.